The storm had turned the coastline into a wall of black water and screaming wind. Inside the temporary military medical station, alarms flashed across the walls as exhausted doctors and nurses fought to keep 3 wounded SEALs alive. Outside, rain hammered the runway, and lightning illuminated the silhouette of a massive military helicopter sitting damaged on the tarmac. Captain Mason Reed stood near the command table. Blood streaked across his uniform. "How long until we can get them out?" he demanded. The flight officer shook his head. "We can't fly that helicopter in this weather. The primary pilot is unconscious, and the backup pilot was injured." The Mason stared through the window. On the other side of the base, his men were trapped with minutes left to live. One SEAL had a collapsed lung. Another had shrapnel buried dangerously close to his heart. The third was losing blood faster than the medics could replace it. Mason clenched his fists. "We need someone who can fly this beast." Nobody answered. Then the doors opened. A woman in a plain navy blue nurse uniform walked into the command room carrying a medical bag. She looked completely out of place. She was young, calm, and almost invisible among the armored soldiers and officers. Mason turned sharply. "Who are you?" "Lieutenant Claire Morgan, temporary medical assignment." He frowned. "We need a pilot, Lieutenant, not another nurse." Claire looked past him toward the damaged helicopter. "I heard." One of the officers almost laughed. "You heard?" Claire placed her medical bag on the table. "I can fly it." The room went silent. Mason stared at her. "You?" Claire nodded. "I can fly it." Mason stepped closer. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, Captain. That helicopter is a military transport aircraft with a damaged navigation system, partial hydraulic failure, and an engine warning." "I know. You've flown one before." Claire looked directly into his eyes. "More than you think." Mason studied her face. There was something strange about her confidence. No trembling hands, no hesitation, no fear. Still, he couldn't believe it. "You're a nurse." Claire quietly answered. "That's what they sent me here as." Before Mason could respond, another alarm sounded. A medic rushed inside. "Captain, we're losing Sergeant Cole." Mason immediately turned. "Get him to the aircraft." The medic froze. "Sir, we can't." Mason looked toward the window, then back at Claire. She was already picking up her medical bag. "I'll fly." Mason grabbed her arm. "Wait." The Claire stopped. "If you're lying about your qualifications, I will have you arrested the moment we land." She gave him a calm look. "If we land." Then she walked toward the hangar. Mason followed. The helicopter looked like a wounded animal. Its side was torn open. Rainwater streamed across its metal body. One rotor blade had visible damage, and warning lights blinked inside the cockpit. Claire climbed aboard. She sat in the pilot's seat. Mason watched her hands move across the controls. Then he saw something that made him stop breathing. A small faded tattoo was visible beneath her sleeve. It wasn't decorative. It was a military insignia. Mason recognized it immediately. His expression changed. "Where did you get that?" Claire didn't answer. She started the engines. The helicopter shook violently. Warning alarms screamed. Mason strapped himself into the passenger seat. "Claire." She looked at him. "Trust me." The aircraft lifted. For one terrifying second, it tilted toward the storm. Mason grabbed the seat. Then Claire corrected it perfectly. The helicopter climbed through the rain. Behind them, the medical team worked desperately on the wounded SEALs. Claire flew low through the storm, using instruments instead of visibility. Mason stared at her. "You've done this before." Claire kept her eyes forward. "Yes, we're." She paused. "Places where nobody knew my name." Lightning exploded across the sky. The helicopter suddenly dropped. An alarm screamed. "Hydraulics." Mason shouted. "I know." Claire fought the controls. The aircraft shook harder. Mason looked at the wounded men behind him. "We're losing altitude." Claire's voice remained steady. "Not yet." She switched systems manually. The helicopter stabilized. Mason stared at her. "You're not just a pilot." Claire said nothing. Then the medical monitor behind them began beeping rapidly. Sergeant Cole was crashing. Claire glanced back. "Can you keep him alive?" Mason looked at the medic. "We're trying." Claire pointed toward the medical bag. "Second compartment." "Blue case." The medic opened it. Inside were advanced emergency instruments. "Where did you get these?" Claire finally looked back. "They're mine." Mason noticed another insignia inside the case. His eyes widened. He recognized the unit. It was one of the most classified special operations medical teams in the military. "Who are you?" Claire looked forward again. Someone who learned that sometimes saving a life means flying into hell. Minutes later, the helicopter broke through the storm clouds. The hospital runway appeared below. Claire landed with almost impossible precision. The doors opened. Medical teams rushed forward. The wounded SEALs were carried inside. Mason remained frozen in the cockpit. Claire removed her headset. He looked at her. "Why were you assigned as a nurse?" She smiled faintly. "Because I asked for it." "Why?" Her eyes moved toward the hospital doors. "Because after years of combat, I wanted to save people without carrying a weapon." Mason looked down. And the helicopter? Claire shrugged. Some skills never leave you. The next morning, Mason entered the medical ward. Sergeant Cole was alive. The other 2 SEALs were recovering. Claire stood beside the window, preparing medication. Mason approached. You saved 3 of my men. Claire shook her head. They saved themselves. I just got them home. Mason smiled. You know, Lieutenant, everyone here thought you were just a nurse. Claire looked at him. And what do you think now? Mason glanced toward the runway where the damaged helicopter rested beneath the morning sun. I think we were lucky you walked through that door. Claire smiled. Then an emergency alarm suddenly sounded again. Mason looked toward her. Claire picked up her medical bag. We're. He pointed toward the runway. Another aircraft just came in. She nodded. Then let's go. And as they ran together through the corridor, Mason finally understood something he would never forget. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one person everyone needs when everything goes wrong. And sometimes, the quietest heroes are carrying the biggest stories. If this story touched your heart, remember that courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it walks into the room wearing a nurse's badge. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories of courage, sacrifice, and heroes who refuse to give up.